In the last section, we mentioned client certificates as a form of authentication. As we learned earlier, certificates are public keys that are signed by a certificate authority, or CA, as a sign of trust. We covered TLS server certificates, but there can also be client certificates. These operate very similarly to server certificates, but are presented by clients and allow servers to authenticate and verify clients. As an IT support specialist, it's important for you to understand client certificates and certificate-based authentication, since you might encounter these in the course of your career. It's not uncommon for VPN systems or enterprise Wi-Fi setups to use client certificates for authentication, so understanding how they work will help you troubleshoot issues. In order to issue client certificates, an organization must set up and maintain CA infrastructure to issue and sign certificates. Part of certificate authentication also involves the client authenticating the server, giving us mutual authentication. This is a positive since the client can verify that it's talking to the real authentication server and not an impersonator. In this case, all clients that are using certificate authentication would also need to have the CA's certificate in their certificate trust store. This establishes trust with the CA and allows the client to verify it's talking to the real server when trying to authenticate. Certificate authentication is like presenting identification at the airport. You show your ID or your certificate to prove who you are. The ID is checked to see if it was issued by an authority that is trusted by the verifier. Was it issued by a government entity? Or is it a novelty license from a gift shop? Obviously, one of those IDs would be accepted at the airport, similar to a certificate being signed by a trusted CA. When you're at the airport, the expiration date on your ID will also be checked to ensure it's still valid. The same thing applies to certificate authentication, although the certificates have two dates that need to be verified: not valid before and not valid after. Not valid before is checking if the certificate is valid yet, since it's possible to have certificates issued for future use. Not valid after is a straightforward expiration date, after which the certificate is no longer valid. Airport authorities also have a list of specific IDs that are flagged. If your ID is on that list, then you'll be rejected for air travel. Similarly, the certificate will be checked against the revocation list, or a CRL. This is a signed list published by the CA which defines certificates that have been explicitly revoked. One last step that's performed as part of the authentication server verification process is to prove possession of the corresponding private key, since the certificate is a signed public key. If we don't prove possession, there's nothing stopping an attacker from copying the certificate, since it's not considered secret and pretending to be the owner. To avoid this, possession of the private key is verified through a challenge response mechanism. This is where the server requests a randomized bit of data to be signed using the private key corresponding to the public key presented for authentication. This is similar to how the airport checks the photo on your ID to make sure you look like the person in the photo and aren't impersonating them.